Okay, so for puff pastry or pâte feuillette is the very first recipe. As I said before, we have two kinds of puff pastry. We have one that's called quick puff pastry or blitz puff pastry. Blitz because on the second during the second war, they had uh, a plane in Germany that was very fast. Was called Blitz, like a thunder. And so they baptized the dough with the Blitz name. So cold butter into cubes. So flour and butter. It's a little soft, my butter. So for the pastry cream, right after you pour in a container, you're gonna keep it. Just get a plastic wrap and put touching it so it doesn't create the skin. Otherwise, it's gonna dry out the top. Okay. So I have all my butter and my flour. If you see, like this recipe calls for the same quantity of butter and flour. So we have different kinds of pastry, puff pastry. And this kind is 1 to 1. We have one that has 75%. We have a different one that has 50% butter. So so we have French, English, and Scottish. So if I am not wrong, this is English puff pastry. I'm just transferring this to another bowl because it's a little bigger. Thank you. What I was saying before about the size of butter, so this is what we call sablage, okay? So you just break in the butter inside the flour until, if I proceed with this, I will be making pâte sablée or pâte brisée. It's not the case. So I want the chunks of butter to be bigger, okay? So I will break it a little more, and I will start adding my water. This shouldn't take more than 3 or 4 minutes to make the dough. If you do take longer than that, you're overworking your butter. You're breaking it into two little pieces of butter. So water. Water is always a variable. It means that when we're making any sort of dough, bread dough, pie dough, anything that calls for water, you have to consider the kind of flour you're using. So sometimes the recipe will call for 180 grams of flour of water, and your flour was a little too good or with a lot of gluten, you might need a little extra, okay? Because what you're doing, you're hydrating the flour. You're not drying the water, you're hydrating the flour. So I used to say that if the recipe says, you know, pour all the water and then you start adding more and more and more flour, it's not a good recipe because the water is water. You are hydrating the flour. The flour is the important ingredient, not the water, right? So try to escape the recipes like that. It doesn't really make sense to be, you know, working around the water. So this is almost there. One little bit. This was 180 milliliters of water. So there we go. So if you see it, I don't really have formed into a dough. And I still have pieces of butter. Look, I have pieces of butter. Okay? So this is where I stop. And I get a little plastic wrap. And I grab my dough. I just put it together. And now you're just trying to make it into a rectangle. And this will be resting. Let's give it 15 minutes before we open and start the folds and turns. Many doughs, you're gonna read the recipe and then they're gonna say, scald the milk. Scalding the milk means trying to break a little bit of the lactose inside the milk. Lactose is sugar. So if I use milk for my pâte choux, for my pie dough, or for my pâte feuillette, or my puff pastry, I will add a little bit too much sugar, okay? And that will start caramelize and give it too much color before I finish baking. Because this has to bake for a little time, and adding sugar will make it dark but still raw, okay? So this, we are gonna make it into a little rectangle. with a little piece of plastic. This is going to the fridge for 15 minutes. Okay? So I roughly put the dough together and I let it rest for an hour. And now I'm going to start handling the dough. So when we're making puff pastry, it doesn't matter if it is the quick puff pastry or the regular traditional puff pastry. We have to do folds and turns. That's what's going to make the puff pastry to puff. So I have the dough and I have butter. So when I have layers and layers of puff pastry dough and butter, the butter, when it starts to melt in the oven, will create some steam and it's going to bring the puff pastry up. So that's how puff pastry don't have any yeast or don't have anything, any sort of leavener other than just steam. So I could just open the dough with a little bit of flour. And I will need a brush. I have a big brush. So flour. Recently, I started to do this, and I find it very efficient when I am making any sort of dough. Instead of just splashing or sprinkling some flour, I will get the flour and I'll really massage into the dough. So that prevents to form spots of a lot of flour and not too much butter. So I sort of mix it. Okay, so I will do the same at the other side. So I'm spreading the butter a little bit into the dough. And then I'm sort of trying to get the excess of flour off, brush it off, and then I start doing the first. That's not counting for all the 4 that I'm doing, okay? Really, this is just accommodating the dough or just putting all the ingredients together. So I will have my first one. So I always start from this side, and I finish up bringing it to the top. And then this is the first turn right here. I always have the scene of my dough right here in front of me at the other side. I'll do the same thing. So a little more flour, and then I'll open the dough. So a good measurement for puff pastry is about the same size of your rolling pin. So I'm gonna see if we can open this into a rectangle. And usually we have little pieces of butter. Don't worry about it. Clean it. And we start the process all over again. So this I will count as my first one, okay? So start accommodating your butter inside your dough. Just a little bit more in here. Yep. I'll count this as my first one. I'm supposed to give it 15 minutes in the fridge so it doesn't melt. But my dough is very, very cold. So I think I can do at least another one. It is time to stop when you see that the dough is melting, the butter is melting on you. So you have to stop. So I'll start the same process. And also it's time to stop when you see that the dough is not opening, it's resisting too much. It means that the gluten is forming and it starts shrinking on you. You have to let it relax and then go back to open. A bit more. Try to accommodate it. Clean. Be sure that you have enough flour in the bottom. Open a little bit longer and wider. Yeah. So clean your butter, your flour. I see that I have pieces of butter. They're really sort of melting. So it's time for me to stop. Always, I will turn to the same point and then I start opening from the same point. Okay, so this I'm gonna wrap and give it 15 minutes in the fridge, and then I'll do 2 more, because if I do 2 more, it means that I will give it 360 degrees, right? If I do 360 degrees, I should have enough layers of butter and dough. Okay, so this is the puff pastry dough, the quick puff pastry or blitz puff pastry that has been resting for an hour. So we are going to be opening it, getting a little. I always use all-purpose flour for dusting, not cake flour. It has too much starch. We will just make lumps, and not bread flour. We will create a little bit of extra gluten that we don't need. So let's open the dough a couple more times. It's okay. Thank you. So I will always start from the same point. It's a little cold. This is probably the best dough we could make, because it's so versatile that I can make any sort of production that I will end up making with all the other doughs, just with this one. So it's a very good thing if you just are able to handle a nice puff pastry. And also the ones we buy, it's most of the time it's just shortening. This is 100% butter. And we are not using any sort of chemical. So at least you are eating a lot of fat, but at least you know what kind of fat it is and how it was handled. It was not processed. So this is the first one. So be sure you have enough flour in the bottom. I'm going to be brushing off the excess of flour. Let me get this off. And I'm going to do the last one. This should be 4. Again, if you see the dough is receding, stop, let it rest. All depends on the kind of flour you have and how much gluten you develop. The dough will recede a little bit more. Yeah. So about the size of the rolling pin. And then you open the last one. This should be enough. Puff pastry, we can make eau de vie. Eau de vie is just pretty much sugar and eggs. And we're going to pour that. I like to add a little bit of almond flour to that. And we just pour that on the puff pastry with some frozen blueberries or berries. Put it to bake. Okay, very easy. Good for morning pastry. We can make palmiers. We're going to be making palmiers today. We can make like a fruit tart. We can make boucher, vol au vent, pithivier, tarte tatin. There's a lot of applications for puff pastry, and you can use for any sort of pie or even for cookies. Use a lot of puff pastry in the pastry shop. So this looks pretty good. So at this point, we can stop. There's no more flour. I don't work with a lot of flour. I try not to. That will really mess up with the proportion of my dough if I have extra flour. So this is ready to start. So this is going to the fridge for another 15 minutes or so, and we are going to be opening it. So it will open into little rectangles to start working with my production. Okay, just remember to clean off all the flour. You don't really need it. Yeah. Okay, so puff pastry, you can open the dough. That dough is enough to make maybe 2 rectangles about the size. And with this one here, I'm going to be doing palmiers. There are as I was saying, there was lots of applications for puff pastry. I just don't have time to make all of them, so we'll make some. Puff pastry with sugar. We are gonna roll it and make little palmiers. Hispanic people, they like to call it palmeritas. So you're gonna open the dough with a lot of sugar. That's what's gonna give you the color and caramelize. Not, you don't brush anything. It should just have, should be shiny and nice and dark golden brown by itself. You don't really have to add anything else. So we're gonna be making little palmiers. I'm gonna do the same the other side. Lots of sugar. I have people saying that to me all the time. Oh, it's a lot of eggs, it's a lot of butter, it's a lot of fat, a lot of sugar. You don't have to eat all of it. It's one at a time. So, a little more. Okay. And then you can roll it. You can roll either way. If I roll this way, I'm gonna get bigger ones. And if I roll this way, I'm gonna get smaller. So just because we have a big family here, we're getting little ones. Thank you. So just rolling. It's a little cold. Yeah. And then roll the other part as well. Do the same thing. And they will meet in the center. Did you guys meet? Have you done this? We did, right? The first day, yeah. Yeah, so just roll it. They should be about the same size, same thickness. I like to use my finger. My 2 fingers are as reference, so we don't need the tips. We don't have enough sugar. So I'll do about one big finger. So remember to use the point of your knife and then you come down so you don't cut your finger off. They don't grow back. They don't grow back. So it's supposed to be funny. Two, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. So it should be about 18 or so. So again, you're gonna do a little more sugar, like this. Push it down. And then you're gonna, just to repeat the whole 16 I said, right? Or 18. 18. Yep. Okay. This is going to be a problem because I have to flip it. I wish I could bake it off here as well as some of the cookies. Okay. Maybe she's right. So we are going to be baking this at 400 degrees for about 15 minutes. And after it's completely caramelized, we have to flip it and give another 5 minutes on 375. So when I have to serve, I have to serve always the side that's in the bottom at the beginning because it's going to get caramel color. Okay? So you're going to be baking this. Okay, so with the other part of the dough, we are getting some sugar. Sugar also helps to give it a little more crispiness. And I'm gonna just cut this in half and do a couple bands of fruit. So I do this so the steam can just go through the dough and it doesn't make it so uneven. So I'm gonna cut in half. There are two ways that you can do this. You can cut it and place on top, or we can just fold it. Okay, I really enjoy having a little more dough, so I really like to cut it and egg wash to glue on top. So I'll do this. Yes, please. Egg whites. So let's just cut this. This is very easy to make. It doesn't take too long. You can freeze the dough you have. All the doughs we made, we can freeze them and use as you need. You only need maybe 30 minutes or so to get room, not room temperature, but a little colder. So we are brushing so I can glue the other part. So I'll glue this part. Here, and then I'll have the other part and the other one. So we are going to bake this off 400 degrees, and we are going to fill up with pastry cream and fresh berries. Somebody could try to bake my puff pastry. Huh? Sarah? To bake the puff pastry? Yeah? You know, 3/4, and you see that it's very caramelized, you flip it. Okay. Great, thank you. Okay, so this is the puff pastry after finished baking. Just sometimes it's good to just make it level, because it's really just air. It's really not a big deal. I'm filling up the pastry bag with the pastry cream. Just break up the pastry cream a little bit. Don't fill up your pastry bag all the way up because it's very hard on your wrist. Good for carpal tunnel, but not for you. So I'm going to be piping a little bit. It is a good idea if you're doing what I'm doing, just, you know, sort of glue your product so you're not start dancing. Okay, so pastry cream is good. It is really up to you how you do your fruit tart. I like mine with a lot of fruit. And sometimes I do into sections. Sometimes I just mix all the fruits together. All depends on, you know, on the day. Sometimes I want it aligned. It cuts better. All depends if I'm making for a buffet, if I'm just serving individually. All depends. So if somebody can come here and help me with this, it would be great. Yeah. A little bit more. Yep. I like it a little bit more. You can just mix the fruits all together. All depends on the day. Just like I said, it's really up to you what you want to do. Yeah. I'm going to add some in between the other fruits as well. So just finish up the way you like. It's going to be very pretty. Fresh fruits are always pretty. Try the ones in season. As you see, the raspberries are not really, they have a different color and they are a little sour. Technically, you're not supposed to see the pastry cream. We're just supposed to see a lot of fruit. You want the fruit with the mold or without? It looks better without. So just finish up. A little more strawberry. So we make everybody happy. Beautiful. Yeah, we're good. We're good. We're done with this. No, you're good here. Yeah. No, I'm good. Using a little bit of that. And I'm going to be glazing it. That's great. Thank you. I'm using apricot glaze. This, we buy it. It has a little extra color that's not necessarily the best for a fruit tart. We can just get apricot preserve and add a little bit of simple syrup, 1 part sugar, 1 part water. And you make your own if you want. Or you can use a little gelatin, maybe a little agar. We'll make a different texture, but the function of the glaze is first to make it shiny. It makes a nice presentation, but especially will protect my fruit from bleeding and from getting spoiled, and will hold the fruit together when I'm cutting it, when I'm slicing it. It doesn't break as much. So if I don't have any sort of glaze to glue it together, it breaks and separates the pastry cream from the fruit too much. Yeah? We can make a glaze with pectin. We can make a simple syrup and just add a little pectin to it. Yes. Gelatin, pectin. And we are going to be making the first item that's called pithivier. Pithivier is just puff pastry and frangipane. So the bottom will get docked, but not the top. And we're going to get a little bit of frangipane. You're going to check the recipe. It's very easy. It's butter, room temperature, whipped with the sugar, 1 part of butter, 1 part of sugar, 1 part of almond flour. In this case, I use hazelnut flour. It's the same proportion. A little bit of lemon zest, flour, and a couple eggs. So make a little pile. So you get a little body in the center. And we don't have to add anything to the dough. Don't have to add anything else or apple or anything. We're going to be making some other stuff with other fruits and fillings, but not this one. So I got a disc of puff pastry, cold. I opened, docked, placed some frangipane on top, made another round, a little bit smaller than the first one. And we are going to be careful placing the upper dough in the center. Be sure that you don't have air pockets. You destroy it. We are going to start from the center all the way around. So not only I'm pushing it down to close it, also making a design. So go all the way around, just like you make a little finishing for apple pie or any sort of dough. So after we place the cold dough on top, we are going to make a little hole in the center so steam is going to escape. And you're going to go in a spiral very gently. Don't go all the way inside the dough. The beauty of the puff pastry is that you really can make a lot of little designs. Just be creative. Pithivier has always to be this way, but you can make different doughs, different apple tart, blueberry, eau de vie, with a little design on top. Even a little chicken pot pie with a little piece of puff pastry on top. So you're finishing making a little design. Don't go all the way to the bottom, as I said. Just push it down. Be sure that you have it closed. So when you start baking, all the steam that's coming out of the dough is going to start to get off, and you're going to have a lot of expansion. So after we finished, a little egg wash. And I really like to bake all my doughs after they're cold. So I would put this in the fridge or in the freezer for maybe 15 minutes until it gets very cold before I bake it at 400 degrees for about 25 minutes. Be sure that you rotate in your oven and you have a very even color. After we finish, we can glaze with a little apricot glaze or just a little powdered sugar on top. So after baking completely even, I just finished with a little bit of apricot glaze and a little sliced almonds. You can toast it if you want. And put on a plate, decorate the plate. And you can keep it room temperature or warm up if you want to serve with a little bit of ice cream or something. So this is a Gâteau pithivier. Thank you. Oops. Just spread a little frangipane. Then you're going to be putting sliced apples or frozen blueberries. Frozen raspberries would be nice too. Or figs or apricots or nectarines. So just spread evenly. Could use a little regular offset spatula as well. Have enough frangipane or almond cream. And we can get some sliced apples or a combination of apples and berries if you want. Just be creative. And you can slice or put on top, have another piece of dough on top, or just have the fruits frozen so you can bake it without bleeding too much. Just make it into a nice little pie. We'll bake it very nice. Okay, making a Napoleon, putting a Napoleon together. We just gonna bake the puff pastry 400 degrees, about 15 minutes or so, until it's completely golden brown. You're gonna try to divide this into 3. And be sure you have all of them the same size. No, that's okay. So we slice it until it's completely even. Don't trash the leftover. We're gonna use it. You're gonna get the cold pastry cream, put inside the bag. Be sure that your pastry cream is very, very cold, or when you slice your Napoleon, you're gonna have a problem. Break it a little bit. Oops. Go all the way down. You could also get a scoop of ice cream and get the pastry cream on top. I like this better. It makes it even. You don't have to do anything else after you pipe. Go all the way down. Get the other part. Just place it on top. So fill up the pastry bag a little bit more. As I have been saying, don't fill up the pastry bag too much, because that will really be very hard for you to pipe and have control of the bag. If it's too full, the bag is going to have control of you instead of you having control of the bag. So just be sure that you break it a little bit and start the whole process again. Try to apply the same pressure so you're going to have even layers of pastry cream. You never want layers to be different. You want them always to be uniform. If you have 8 ounces of pastry cream in one layer. Suppose you have 8 ounces in every single layer. So after you finish the last one, you're gonna put your puff pastry on top. A little bit of pressure. In this cake, I'm gonna finish the Napoleon as a cake, as a torte. So I don't have to cut it. I just can serve it into a cake instead. So I'm gonna fill up the little gaps with the little pastry cream. So break a little bit more of your pastry cream. Never get too much in a spatula either. Always just the tip of your spatula. So you go all the way down. Try to make it even. It has to be very, very cold. Don't worry about the mess. It's very normal. Puff pastry is supposed to be very flaky, so it's really gonna make a mess when you handle. And breaking little pieces is really not a big deal. You're gonna finish with a little bit of powdered sugar so nobody can tell the pieces of puff pastry that are gonna be a little more fragile. So just go all the way around. Finish. And then the leftover puff pastry that you have, you just have to break it down. Very well. And you're gonna just finish the sizes of your cake. So this is a Gâteau Napoleon, or a Napoleon Gâteau. It's not just a Napoleon itself. You can serve for a birthday, for a dinner party or something, the whole cake instead. So apply a nice coat of 10x sugar on top and move it to the plate very carefully. It's very fragile. Try to have a plate that's the same size or you're gonna have a problem. So there are lots of different items that you can make with puff pastry. It's a very nice dough, especially the delicious one we make. It's 100% butter. So we made a little Napoleon, or a Gâteau Napoleon Gâteau as well. This one I just sliced it in half. We could make it round as well. Pastry cream in the middle and just a little powdered sugar on top. We made some palmiers that we made earlier. We made the Gâteau pithivier. It's just frangipane inside. We made apple with frangipane as well. So I just laid a little bit of frangipane and sliced some apple, glazed a little bit just to make shiny and nice. And a little bit of blueberry. I froze the blueberry and I pour on top of the frangipane, slice it, braid it, and I bake it everything about 425, at least for 20 minutes. It really needs a lot of color. Thank you very much. I'll see you on the next item we'll be making later. Thank you.